Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Broadband Breakfast Live Online for Wednesday, June 12th of 2024. My name is Drew Clark, and I'm the editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast. We have a very exciting program for each of you today. I look forward to turning to it and introducing all of our panelists who will be participating here. Before we do that, though, I just want to let those of you who are new to Broadband Breakfast or haven't been to one of our weekly webcasts before, just a little bit more about our subject matter that we cover day in and day out at Broadband Breakfast. We focus on what we call better broadband, better lives. To us, that means the infrastructure, but it also means the ways it's used, the tools that people use to access high capacity broadband, and how people receive the information they need to be able to translate that better capacity broadband into better lives. We are coming off of a week where we were out in California at the Cal Matters Ideas Festival. The Cal Matters Ideas Festival was the first of its kind, and it enabled a lot of topics on the policy and ideas in California for California policy. We were there the day before for, I guess, the kickoff last Wednesday. So if you joined it last Wednesday, I hope you were able to join later on in the day for the California Broadband Summit. Was 10:30 till the afternoon, and the videos of that event will be made available later this week for everyone for free. We today are going to be continuing the series that we've been having on smart cities, and for this discussion, we're going to be talking about the role of smart cities and digital inclusion. And, kind of the frame for our discussion is how the smart cities dream hinges on ensuring universal internet access for all residents, collecting comprehensive data on internet availability, and broadband coverage really is pivotal to be able to facilitate full access to broadband deployment. What progress have cities been making in gathering and using data sets, and how can municipalities strategically leverage these numbers to facilitate and allocate resources? We are still, unfortunately, missing one of our panelists here, and I saw him just a minute ago, so just going to send a quick email as well over there, and hopefully we can get this sorted out here soon as possible. The other thing I just want to do is to turn to our panelists that we have. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them, and hopefully we'll get the last one by the time we go live here with the discussion. So let's turn to our view of everyone here. Oh, there we are. Okay, great. So Randy, just please change the name on your login. This is why everyone has a unique login, so that the name shows up correct. And if you need help doing that.
Oh yeah, okay. I got Juliet's name.
Yeah, there we go.
For some reason. Yeah, the mystery of Zoom.
Yep. Well, while Randy changes that, let me start with the others, and then I'll kind of go through the order of our program here. One of our second speakers, or one of our speakers right after Randy, will be Denise Atkinson-Shorey. Denise is the president of eLuminosity, and eLuminosity is Denise founded eLuminosity to address the need for third-party neutral expertise in telecommunications infrastructure and design, digital equity, inclusion, and digital literacy. And I'm sure, again, we'll hear more from you, Denise, when you are up, but thank you for being with us and for sharing your expertise. After Denise, we're going to hear from Delia Sanchez. Delia is the community engagement specialist for the Colorado Broadband Office. And really grateful you could be with us. Been on stage with Brandy Ryder of the California Broadband Office. So it's exciting to have your role as community engagement specialist in this discussion. And in particular, Delia has worked before the Broadband Office at the Denver Public Schools in multiple roles for more than a decade. During the pandemic, she saw the direct correlation between lack of access to proper technology and students' performance and health. So looking forward to your contributions to the discussion, Delia. Following Delia will be Juliet Fink Yates. And Juliet is the Broadband and Digital Inclusion Manager for the City of Philadelphia. She's worked on addressing digital equity since 2001, when she managed a small nonprofit ISP for 10,000 low-income homes in Philadelphia. And in 2010, she wrote, together with the city, a broadband stimulus grant that brought $5.4 million to low-income communities. So Juliet, really glad we can bring someone with your expertise and familiarity. And we are coast to coast because we have people from Philadelphia through the middle of the state all the way to the West Coast. And we will kind of our batting cleanup will be Louisa Kalumpong, and she is currently working for the city of Oakland with an emphasis on fiber asset integration for citywide broadband. She's passionate about the connectivity of the future and the long-term impacts of federal, state, and local initiatives. And then finally, but will be first in our program, is J. Randolph Leaning. Randy is the founder of broadbandtoolkit.com, a firm that provides analytical broad planning tools for the telecommunications industry to help state broadband offices, investors, grant applicants, engineering firms, and ISPs. And we had a chance to hear from Randy around the time of our Broadband Measurement Summit. Glad we could get you back, Randy, to talk about the role of these data sets in digital inclusion and digital equity. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker, Randy. The floor is yours. And please go ahead and share screens as I also highlight your camera. So go ahead, Randy.
Great. Thank you, Drew. Thanks for the kind of introduction. Okay, let's see. Okay, I think, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
So why digital equity analytics? BEAD stands for Broadband Equity Access and Deployment. And there's also a separate Digital Equity Act that funds 3 different programs. And so this sort of begs the question of what analytics are available to support this decision making. When we look at any kind of community, we often find, 3 what I'm calling sources of truth. One is data reported by ISPs. Another is data that comes from surveys. And the third is crowdsourced data. And they look something like this, just as an example. And there are lots and lots of layers of possible data. Unpacking some of the stuff that falls in the digital equity category, the American Community Survey is something that is comprehensive and expansive. You can think of it as a number of geographic levels of aggregation, times a number of subject tables, times parameters, per table, equaling a total number of data sets. And the number of data sets is on the order of 500,000, and with a few that aren't rendered, but basically it's huge. So it's more like the Library of Congress than it is a particular data set. So if you use ACS, as a lot of people do, you need to either have someone do the curation for you or be very skilled at that and be very focused. Another data set which is important is associated with the Digital Equity Act. They talk about covered population, and that is a metric that is calculated from 8 other inputs. And all of this data is available at a tract level. Something else that is popular and widely discussed is the CSV data associated with BEAD. Every state office publishes volumes 1 and volume 2. Volume 1 has a list of locations that identify served, unserved, underserved locations. And this is something that's often very cryptic to people, but once you visualize it, it's extremely powerful. So, the takeaway from this is downloading CSVs, which all of us do, is not the same thing as having actionable data. There are several steps in between. Oftentimes it needs to be processed. There's a curation process. Often you need to apply regulatory framework, and so that's why asking the question of what's available for digital equity and how do we use it is important. Finally, a very important process for BEAD is subgrantee selection. And this is something that most states are just about to start at this point in time. And basically there is a left brain aspect and a right brain aspect. The left brain is complying with all sorts of complicated NOFO requirements. It's basically a very detailed checkbox. With the right brain portion, every state has written a 5-year plan and a digital equity plan, and a lot of these are stories. And they're stories which, if told well, include a lot of rich visualized data. And so a state ideally should be putting these two pieces together. And our company has historically focused on toolkits that do a lot of infrastructure analytics, and we're in the process of curating some very sophisticated data sets with hundreds of items that will do the latter, that'll cover all the digital equity stuff. Just a few more quick examples of why this is important. Here's a picture of income in a geography. You'll see this little left-hand piece is bright red. It's sort of a high income area. You can look at a completely different data set, which is internet access via satellite. And interestingly, adoption is huge in that area with high income and just barely above zero elsewhere. This is a correlation between data sets, and if you didn't visualize the data, you would completely miss this relationship. And just to another example is broadband adoption by age. Here you've got 18 to 64 years compared with 65 and above. There are a few areas where adoption just falls through the floor, and you're able to see this by comparing two data sets. And then there are also instances, for instance, where we look at high density low-income rental environments, which have been a topic of discussion in terms of how you cover them. There are data sets that are very specific that help you find those items so you can have that discussion. Finally, one of the things that is a headwind to adoption is the lack of devices in some cases. So this shows several areas where there are a large number of people who don't even have a smartphone or a tablet. Literally nothing to access the internet with. So whether they have coverage or not is that's not really the answer. So in the same areas, they do have coverage in terms of availability, but there's still an unsolved problem. With that, I will hand over to Denise.
Thank you, Denise. I'll go ahead and feature you. I think we still have the slides that you're going to display. So take it away, Denise.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you, Randy. I'm going to take the data sets and the information that Randy's been talking about and try and tell a brief story. It'll be very brief, but we used some of the data sets from the now defunct indicators of broadband need from the NTIA, including some of the pieces that Randall's talked about. And in using those for the city of Pueblo, we began to study and look at broadband access and digital equity. What we came up with was a number of components that had not been addressed. Pueblo is an urban rural city in Colorado, and it is it faces all of the components of a rural environment, even though it is a city of over 100,000 people. It is in the southern part of Colorado. It is a majority minority community that is predominantly Hispanic, and there's largely a low income group of people in the urban core that, when we looked at our data, showed that they were not connected. So we chose to begin the process by identifying an alliance of stakeholders and identifying components that we needed to address, and we needed to look at the data that would support those pieces. If you want to go to the next slide, Randy. We identified the need for a number of digital navigation topics: business navigators, housing navigators, healthcare, education, intercultural, government, and workforce. So we knew that we needed not only to have the traditional digital navigator, but we needed digital navigators that could work in specialized areas. And we began to talk to and share the data and the research that we'd done. I'm going to go to the next slide. So we began with those visioning sessions with our stakeholders. We began to talk about things. We began to share the information we found. And over time, we will then move to asking and measuring with our stakeholders, focus groups that talk about how well we're doing. We think we're doing a little bit better. We think we're improving. There were no broadband initiatives in the city or surrounding area in Pueblo for the previous 20 years. And over the last couple of years, the implications of showing the data that we pulled together and working with the community to talk about the need for access and digital equity. We've been able to, we were funded for a NTIA Connecting Minority Communities pilot grant. We have been funded for an NTIA Middle Mile grant. We've been given funding for capital projects grants. We received an FCC ACP pilot grant, and we have 2 equity and investment projects, private money coming in to do fiber builds to the home. So that brings us to the access component. We knew we needed to build on that. And that's the broadband leadership piece that we think is important. And the last slide talks just briefly about Adelante Connect, which is the Connecting Minority Communities slide.
Great. Is that the end, Denise?
I think I'm out of time.
Okay, great. Let's turn to you, Delia. What are your perspectives on this topic?
Oh, you're muted. Delia,
Yes, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. If we can go, oh, there we are. There's my slide. So I'm going to talk about workforce. We all know that this is a very important topic, and BID-funded projects here in Colorado will create more than 3,000 jobs. And not only Colorado has received BID funding, right? We are aware that 49 other states have received this funding. So we know that there can be a potential nationwide workforce shortage when it comes to the construction and telecom jobs needed over the next 3 years. So the Colorado Broadband Office, together with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, created a broadband workforce plan. This plan explores ways to partner with local schools, colleges, universities to develop programs and degrees that will support construction and telecom jobs. We have created a core working group that consists of stakeholders and the state departments, because we want to hear from everyone. We want to hear everyone's opinion and try to be as inclusive as possible. So our goals that we created are awareness, and that's to inform Coloradans of the jobs needs. And our goal for the end of this year is to reach out to 10,000 Coloradans. We are going to be reaching out not only in English, but in Spanish. We're going to be using different communication channels to inform our citizens of the opportunities that are coming their way. We're also going to be training at least 3,000 Coloradans to enter the broadband field by the end of 2025. And lastly, employment. Our goal is to employ at least 1,500 Coloradans by the end of 2026. We are taking this job very seriously. We are hoping to see more opportunities inside the telecom and construction jobs, and to actually our citizens to start creating a new pathway. That's our goal, to train them to for them to keep growing and seeing other opportunities that broadband is bringing to them. Back to you, Drew.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Let's turn it over to Juliet, and feel free to go ahead and share your screen for the presentation you have for us.
Great. Should be able to see it now. You guys can see that? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So the City of Philadelphia has been working on its digital equity, as Drew said, since at least 2010, when we got a BTOP award from NTIA during the first Obama stimulus package. And at that time, we built out computer centers called key spots, and we did digital literacy training. And really what it did was it helped develop a network in the community of folks who were really interested in digital inclusion. The pandemic obviously changed almost everything, and as many of you know, and so it really supercharged the work we were doing. In 2021, or beginning of 2022, we released our first digital equity plan for the City of Philadelphia, which was focused on sort of the pillars that everybody here is probably aware of. That Philadelphians can access appropriate and affordable devices, that Philadelphians can access and afford the internet connectivity they need, that Philadelphians can develop the digital skills necessary for work and life, and that we develop and grow our own infrastructure and ecosystem to last beyond administrations for the city. So that was the 4 goals, and each of those goals has many initiatives, and many of those are based on data that we collected and data sets that we worked through. So a couple of we talk about kind of the data sets. These are some of the things that we've been using, and I will say some because there are many, many data sets out there that we leverage. But one of the first things that we did in 2021 was we partnered with Wilco and John Horrigan and Century Tech to do a 2021 household internet assessment, which was a randomized phone survey to 2,500 residents. And that was really to benchmark kind of where the city was at that time. Because the ACS data was about 2 years old, we really didn't have a sense of what was going on in that moment during the pandemic in 2021. And we wanted to be able to benchmark and see what was happening in the city, and then be able to see our progress over time. We also have the city works on or provides quarterly surveys to the community to get community voices and hear back from the community on various initiatives that the city's doing. So last fall, we did a short digital access survey, kind of a follow-up from our 2021 household internet assessment, where we really drilled down a little bit deeper, and we asked 5 questions. Do you feel like you have affordable, reliable internet? We asked the question about, I am confident using computers. I want to join classes to improve tech skills. And then we asked questions like, well, what kinds of programs should the city invest in? And how do residents want to be engaged in digital equity? That survey reached about 800 folks, and it was both online and through landlines and through recruited online panels. Both surveys were offered in multiple languages, which is very important to make sure we are reaching vulnerable residents in Philadelphia. And then the other data set that we are really looking at when we talk about our infrastructure and our assets is around pulling together sort of all this disparate information. So where are all of the facilities that the city owns located? Where are the libraries, the firehouses, the police stations, the schools, the rec centers? In the recreation centers, we've been, this was a very large system. There's 180 some rec centers. Most of them did not have fiber access. And so we were looking at what type of internet they did have, which ones currently have Wi-Fi. And then other data sets that we were looking at is where are city-owned poles, where does the streets department and the city-owned fiber, where does that exist? Where are the railways building out fiber? Where are, this is an interesting one, the illegal dumping locations. And this is important because folks often want to put up cameras, but they can't if there's not fiber there. So we wanted to see where those illegal dumping locations were and how it overlays with some of our most vulnerable residents. And then obviously overlaying it with the ACS data, our own 2021 assessment data, and then demographics around poverty, race, and density. And so what came out of that are a couple like really salient points, right? So Philadelphia has all this infrastructure. We are in by no metric, no matter what fabric we're looking at, we're going to look like we're served. And it's going to be very hard for Philadelphia to get any BEAD money. And I think this is largely true for almost all major metro areas. And yet we still have 14.7% of Philadelphia households still have no internet subscription to the home. And that the 31% of households with an annual income below 20,000 don't have internet access, and 33% of seniors lack broadband access in Philadelphia. This metric, 32% of Philadelphia households are considered subscription vulnerable. This is really important. This came out of the John Horrigan work with CentriTech. This idea of subscription vulnerability does not mean that folks adopted it. They have probably adopted internet in the past, but they can no longer afford it, and they're going in and out of internet access. So about a third of all Philadelphia households are vulnerable. As well as this really important metric, 75% of low-income residents say more than $21 a month for broadband is too expensive for them. They're probably going to forgo it in some way. And then we look at ACS data and then how much it would cost Philadelphia to cover the full amount of those who are enrolled in the ACP, which it would be $65 million a year, which is really untenable for the city of Philadelphia at this moment. Out of our Voices survey, this was a great bit of data that we got. What program would be your top priority for future city investments? And by income, lower income folks overwhelmingly wanted the city to invest in helping residents access devices like laptops and computers. Whereas if you look at higher income residents, they were more interested, they felt the city should put investments into broadband affordability. And I think kind of seeing some of that data really helps us guide our decision making. And then here is just sort of a map of how we've been mapping our assets, where you can see the dumping locations, where you can see the physical assets, the libraries, and sort of where we have internet access and where we don't on a census tract level for Philadelphia. So what are we doing? We are doing many things. One of our biggest programs is PHL Connected, which we launched in 2020, which provides a free low-cost option through T-Mobile hotspots to K-12 students in need of support. And it also connects with our larger digital navigator network, which is hosted by the United Way and 211. So anybody in Philadelphia can dial 211. They can get an appointment online or in person with a digital navigator. And that digital navigator can either help them get, if they're a hotspot, or help them with affordable internet access to devices, and all sorts of other things that they may need. We also have a program called the Digital Literacy Alliance, which is a seed fund for innovative digital programs. It was launched through our Comcast franchise agreement. And we recently started a partnership with PCs for People to scale up device refurbishing, redistribute computers, and provide tech support to those who are in need. So where are we going? My last slide. We are really thinking about how we can leverage that data set of public assets to expand low cost and free internet access in low income communities by allowing ISPs to place their communication equipment on city-owned properties. We're working through that process now. With the demise of ACP, we're really looking at how we can address affordability and thinking about new models for subsidizing internet and, of course, devices, because that is what our residents say they most need help with in our high-need communities. And then also thinking about how we build out our city fiber backbone. How are we providing, right now we are working on providing gigabit fiber and Wi-Fi to all 100 recreation centers, and then creating a long-term broadband infrastructure plan for the city. Stop.
Awesome. Let's now turn quickly to Louisa for our final brief presentation. Then we've got a lot of questions already teeing up. I've got many questions, but over to you, Louisa.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I do not have any slides, but I just wanted to give a brief intro and talk a little bit about the Oakland story. So my name is Louisa Calampong. I'm with the Information Technology Department here at the City of Oakland. You know, the story of Oakland really started, as most things happened with broadband, is COVID. What we realized here in Oakland is that Oakland is actually quite unserved in terms of the availability of fiber being the only simple threshold of what is considered served in status, but it doesn't actually have the end user experience, nor does it take into account the affordability aspect, and nor does it take into account the adoption, where it's culturally competent for folks to want to access the internet. It seems like a lot of where we are needing these kinds of resources are going to be where the highest population of brown and Black folks are within Oakland. And this isn't very surprising. Shout out to Oakland Undivided. They are the nonprofit advocacy group that has been working a lot on the data aspect and trying to really see and capture the inaccessibility of the internet within Oakland. They have conducted numerous surveys, and they have partnered with Oakland Unified School District to come up with 500,000 speed tests in over 18,000 locations within Oakland. So we are data rich in a lot of ways to understand where this need really is. My role in particular is to figure out how to leverage our resources best so that we can get to this digital inclusion that we are hoping to receive with our broadband master plan that we're currently working on. And, you know, working through that broadband master plan has really shown a lot of the work that is needed within the next few years to try to reach folks that are just not understanding the value of the internet in terms of where and how they can access it. And then working with our community-based organizations to make sure that they have the resources they need as well. It's a very different game when it comes to trying to do digital divide within the urban space. The onus is always on residents and communities to come up with the need and the resources, because so much of the digital divide is centered around rural, and we are once again getting left behind when it comes to digitally redlining. So hoping that moving forward, we're able to really communicate the need that we have within our communities. And it's looking like, you know, hope we're making the steps, even within our Oakland leadership, of knowing that the data that we have shows that this is a real need within our community. So thank you, Drew.
Thank you very much. And I want to make sure to give a shout out to the sponsors of Broadband Breakfast. We would not be able to do this free programming every Wednesday at 12 noon without the support of our sponsors, who include Utopia Fiber, Comcast, SmartWave Technologies, Ookla, Wesco, Coos Systems, Institute for Local Self-Reliance, Community Broadband Networks Initiative, the California Emerging Technology Fund, BroadbandToolkit.com, Google Fiber, Broadband Now, WISPA, Broadband Without Boundaries, NCTA, the Internet and Television Association, Tirana Networks, and Network On. We've really had a great table setting, if you will, by our panelists. Let me lead with the question I've already previewed for you all. And I'd love everyone's answer to this. What is the most basic and important data source for state and city officials to access, to use, and to prepare for digital equity? We've obviously heard of several of these very interesting ones. The survey that John Horgan participated in. It's great to hear about that, Juliet. Tell us, let's just go from the first panelist to the last one. What are the 2 or 3 kind of fundamental data sets that need to be used and frequented? Randy.
So I think the ACS and then the Digital Equity Act data set are both very important, and the ACS is expansive, but then also local surveys are very important.
Okay. Denise?
So I'll put a plug in for the NTIA's indicators of broadband need, which is no longer available. Because we found it very valuable and very easy to work with, and a lot of the people that we work with did. Since that's no longer available, I defer to the 2 surveys that Randy just talked about, which we've been working to identify additional data sets through it.
Do you know why that's no longer available? Why was that phased out?
I think that as they changed with the new FCC mapping, they had based it on the old process, but I don't have a clear answer for that.
Okay, well, if there's an NTA official watching, we'd love to hear from you. Just email us at info@breakfast.media. Delia, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, actually, I agree with the previous panelists. We have the FCC, the NTIA. We also have the U.S. Bureau, where we can find data that helps us. But those organizations also have some errors, right? And I think we need to find really accurate data when we want to find where the underserved and unserved locations are. And I'm very proud of our mapping team here at the Colorado Broadband Office. We were able to challenge last year 15,000 locations, and which means that the more that we challenge, the more funding that we get. The more funding that we get, the better that we can serve those unserved and underserved locations. So I honestly rely a lot on our mapping team. They have been collecting data for a long, long time. They also have a mapping hub that we go to a lot, and it has been great. Honestly, it has helped us quite a bit.
What did you say? A mapping what? A mapping what that you go to a lot?
Hub.
Hub. Okay, where is that hub?
It is in our Broadband Office website, Colorado Broadband Office website. That it's you guys will see our information at the end of this presentation, but I will be happy to put it on our website.
Awesome, and we aim to. Sorry. Yeah, and we aim to put all of these presentations on the website for this event. And I should also add that at Broadband Breakfast, we do extensive state-by-state coverage of broadband deployment and mapping. So, for example, just dropping into the chat window, the link to Broadband Breakfast coverage at Colorado, since several of you are from Colorado. These will lead to the various pieces and reports that we've done, and will, again, as I just said, have links to other resources. Juliet, what are your thoughts on the kind of the basics for what you in the city need to be acquainted with and communicating to the citizens around?
So I would absolutely agree with starting with the American Community Survey, sorry. That data set, I think, is very rich because you can get it down to the census tract. And that's why it's in a city like Philadelphia and many other places, a zip code has a wide range of incomes and need within just one zip code. And Philadelphia is very much almost like block by block kind of city. And so being able to get down to that census tract is really, really great in terms of understanding, having a large enough data set to make some conclusions from. So I do really like that one. I will say that it is old, and so you're always going to be looking at older data, and when you look at the larger amount of data in the 5-year data set is in some ways more valuable, but 5 years ago is very different when internet access to today. So there's some challenges data set for sure, but it's a great place to start. I also really love Benton's, their affordable connectivity program performance tool, because they have a lot of pieces of the data in that data set already. And when we talk about vulnerability and who's using ACP, it's a really good marker of who's going to need subsidized internet and who's going to for everybody. And it's just that we really have used that tool quite a bit.
Thank you. Louisa.
I've thought about this question quite a bit. Like I said earlier, we're data rich. So we have all of the speed tests. We have focused in on the entirety of Oakland in terms of where these speed tests are located, all the way from the Oakland Hills, which is arguably some of the richest in the Bay Area, down to the deep East Oakland, where a lot of the poorest zip codes are within our city limits. Regardless, we're still up against the idea of what these maps look like. As Delia already said, they could be quite fallible. And what I'm seeing often is our data is really helping to turn the tide when it comes to Oakland leadership. When it comes to our leadership, we want to make sure that they understand where we're actually seeing the most need, like I said. And we can also communicate to state leaders as they're disseminating out funding for future programs, that we can show the unserved nature within our communities. It's at its base, these speed tests are really going to be that end user experience that we're all trying to figure out. There's a lot of oversubscription at these areas. We are most of Oakland has a lot of different telecommunications infrastructure within it. What's important to realize is that who can actually access this infrastructure? Who can actually afford it? So it's we just hope that moving forward, the data that we have, and we have amazing GIS data within the city as well. Everything from the ACS data that everybody has already mentioned. We understand where our demographics lie. It's just making sure that we communicate it out to those who can really help us with our resources to funnel that funding to where it's needed most.
I have a question I want to ask Randy, and I've just gone ahead and shared one of the pages that you had up here earlier. This is about, I guess, it's framed as ISP reported versus survey based versus crowdsourced. Randy, could you just go a little deeper into what are the differences in the quality of data from ISP reported versus survey based versus crowdsourced, and how do you find these useful for the purpose of digital equity and digital inclusion, Randy?
No, that's a great question, Drew. So what's interesting is each is immensely valuable, but each has limitations. With ISPs, it can be very granular, and also an ISP can report, technically what they believe is there. However, ISPs may not perfectly represent everything, or at least there's questions and pushback on that, and of course a challenge process. But also ISP data basically reflects what's available. Survey-based data, such as this data set from the ACS, basically indicates what people are doing themselves. So have they subscribed to a service? What devices do they own? It's also because it's survey-based, it needs to be a little bit simpler, because people don't always understand the technologies that they're using. And then finally, with crowdsourced, the little dots that you see here are actually Ookla measurements, and we're attributing them to individual blocks. And so there's just a tremendous richness of data. You can also look at stuff that was collected last month, so it can be very, very timely as well. Part of the limitations there, though, is you need to have devices that have GPS to geolocate, you know, so that's a constraint. Also, a lot of people are accessing the internet over Wi-Fi, and they don't know how to set up a good Wi-Fi system in their home. So they may have great access, but a poorly configured Wi-Fi system. So those are all, so again, there are constraints with each of these, but in combination, it's gives you a pretty representative picture.
Let me ask Denise and Delia as well, specifically on a city like Pueblo. You used the term kind of a rural urban or a rural city. I wanted to get a little bit more information on that and how some of these issues of broadband access and usage are playing out in Pueblo.
Do you want to start, Delia? You want me to? Okay, so the term urban rural has been used and actually is a designator. So when we do apply for grants, we actually are considered rural, even though we are a larger city. And a lot of the slides you've been seeing are slicing and dicing from Pueblo, because we found it very interesting. So pretty much Pueblo was kind of ignored for 20 years. It wasn't one of the big front range cities, and nothing happened. And once we started saying, hey, look, we have 30 and 40% of our communities that aren't connected, and they're in the minority and low income areas. So if we overlaid the low income and minority areas of the city, those were the places where we saw as much as like 40% of the households did not have a connection. Even though, like we talked about several times here, all of those are considered served under the FCC mapping. So there's other issues that we need to deal with.
Okay. And I've just paged through a couple of these great slides. Again, these will all be available on the web page for this event, digging into Pueblo and some of these analytics. Delia, what would you add to this discussion and how the Colorado Broadband Office and your effort in particular is approaching using the data needed to have an effective program for a city like a community like Pueblo?
Yeah, I think like it's very important to let our community members know that they have a role, that they have a saying, to challenge any data that it's being published. You know, there's sometimes information saying that such and such county has a reliable internet, when they don't actually. So I think like the main thing for me as a community engagement specialist, it's giving a voice to those that don't have a voice yet, letting them know that if they don't talk, if they don't challenge these locations, then our office, the CBO, won't be aware of where we don't have internet. And that's where I come from. It's just giving our citizens a voice and let them know that they have a role and that they need to challenge any information that has been published.
Yeah, and I think to just pick up on what I think Louisa said, Pueblo is in the same spot. There won't be any BEAD money coming here because it's been earmarked as covered, even though we know that at the end of the day, we're still going to have to find a way to connect that 40% of households that do not have a connection right now.
Yeah. We got a number of questions here coming in. It's awesome, but let's see if Juliet or Louisa have anything to add to this discussion we've had about data and looking deeply at the data.
Yeah, I'll just pipe in really quick. Just to continue with what I was saying, cities have so many different things that they're trying to account for. I mean, everything from housing to streets, to just a lot of things competing for the same resources that we're also trying to compete for. And how do we ensure that what we're trying to do kind of is a more holistic approach rather than make it secular, like, hey, this is just broadband, hey, this is just housing. There's a lot of ways that we can take the data that we have, integrate it with the assets that we already continue to use and use it for many things. And then we can kind of leverage it in a way that really makes the city work together as a whole. Safety and housing are really big things in Oakland. And so, but with the availability of fiber, with the availability of just better connectivity all around, we're able to really, I hate this phrase, but kill two birds with one stone. And I hate saying that, but it's, and just try to capture as many different issues as we can throughout the city instead of like just having it be these really bifurcated things, which they don't have to be. So, yeah. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Julia.
Great. We've got a lot of great questions. This one from Kimmy Way says, I am concerned that coverage maps to identify and underserved locations seem to only take into account the availability of broadband access points without taking into account whether residents can afford to connect to broadband and whether they have devices to do it. Are there ways to map affordability and access? Juliet, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think this is like the really critical piece, which is that if you look at Philadelphia, it's going to look completely served by that, and we are going to have folks who it's not going to say that anybody is even underserved, because what is available is, internet access for almost everybody for a price. And what we know is that folks cannot afford it. And that is the way, unfortunately, that the BEAD funding and some of this infrastructure money has been allocated. The Affordable Connectivity Program was meant to address the affordability problem, and it has gone away. And so what I think really is critical here is, the ACS can get you started on understanding the affordability problem. Doing your own survey, I think, can also help with that affordability problem, and working, there's lots of folks who've done surveys across now your state, and the state might even have done the survey and be able to share some of that data with you. So your state's broadband offices are required to do some of that. And so they should be sharing it with you, and you should be able to get something. But even if you wanted to do your own, you should be able to get some of that affordability data. The value in the affordability data, it's going to probably overlap with some similar things that you've already seen, like poverty levels in your regions, right? Or high areas of violence or other metrics. It's going to overlap with that. But the real value is to make the case to your legislators and Congress folks to say, look at what's happening. We have a major problem in Philadelphia, Pueblo, or X, and we're not getting any money to address it. Like we actually, there's a problem there. There's a real problem there. And so we need to figure out a way to solve this either at a federal, state, or local level, because the affordability problem is not going away. And it's not going to go away once the rural communities are served either. They're still going to have an affordability problem.
Drew, you're muted.
We have a comment here from Michael Pitch, but it's probably worth asking as a question. Many counties are not BEAD challenge or challenge eligible because the process is too complex. ISPs are challenging and are skewing the maps to their competitive advantages. Any reaction to this point that Michael Pitch makes?
I'd make we would have been happy to challenge, but we couldn't afford to do anything like that. We're nonprofits, and we're working with city, and they don't have resources, expertise, or funding to do the kinds of complex recording. And I see everybody shaking their head. There was just no way. We had a 30-day window. We had no funding or people. It was frustrating.
Yeah.
And I think, Drew,
Drew,
the session that you did on the challenge process, where we had a lot of state broadband offices, was actually great, because it showed that there was it's really hard to participate, and there was sort of a challenge fatigue. And so there is a portion of the problem that's unanswered, basically.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe on the other hand, we have a question here from Dane Jasper of sonic.net. He says, here in California, I haven't seen issues with availability mapping in urban city locations, but still about 20% of households don't subscribe. You know, saying the building the network is not the biggest challenge in my experience. Any reactions to that point there that Dane Jasper is making?
Hi, Dane.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Dane Jasper, Sonic is actually a provider within Oakland. It's so we're grateful to have partners like Sonic that are working with us to make sure that our MDUs are not beholden to any one provider. So we've been working with them to ensure that they are able to go into multi-dwelling units that once had a marketing deal necessarily with one provider, and we're able to help them bring that into certain buildings so that way we can continue to bridge this divide. So and I do tend to agree that perhaps the building isn't necessarily the issue, but there are just other barriers that we have within California that are showing the inaccessibility to broadband that just doesn't have the right components that make it, you know, that much more viable in terms of, like I said already, affordability, making sure that folks understand what it is you're trying to say when it comes to English as a second language. There's just that kind of outreach that we are hoping to get to residents isn't there. And it's one of the barriers that I know that City of Oakland, whenever we're trying to make the right strides to, you know, bridge the digital divide, will be able to address in a much more meaningful way than it has in the past. So, and there are some very distinct examples that I can go into, but for the sake of time, I'm happy to go into them. But you know, I think it can be underscored that the kind of outreach that we need in certain communities needs to meet people where they're at.
Okay, we've had just a second. We've had such a good and rich discussion. We're going to go on a little bit, another 5 or 10 minutes beyond. So obviously, if you need to leave at the top of the hour to our attendees, feel free. But we're going to continue for a bit longer. And I think, was it you, Denise, that wanted to weigh in, or who else wanted to?
So we have the Connecting Minority Communities grant, which we hope will address some of these issues. It's small, it's a pilot, but we will be providing access in a gig connection and a device and digital navigators to 200 university students going to this Colorado State University at Pueblo. And we will be providing navigators training in their households and in the community. This won't be based in the university. It's based in the community. So the households with first generation internet access, a household will actually get support from the beginning, as well as businesses and community members and other household members in that community. So not only is a specific student getting that support, but the others in the community, so we can begin to get people excited about being a nerd, kind of.
That's such a good point, Denise. I think like digital navigators are going to make a great impact, right? It's for me, a digital navigator is not only someone that is going to be able to help you one-on-one, right? But someone that hopefully speaks your language. We know that with the amount of newcomers that we have right now coming into the States, it's very important that we have people that speak English, Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, you know, you name it. And when you find somebody that speaks your language, that understands your culture, it's more easy to trust that person. Because many times what I have seen is that people sometimes didn't sign up for the ACP program because they were concerned about the questions that they might be asking them or their status here in the US. And that's what it stops minorities sometimes of taking advantage in a good way of programs like ACP that will help them to connect to classes, to apply for jobs. So I think that digital navigators can make and are making already a big difference. Here at the Denver Public Library, for example, the digital navigators are helping one-on-one. We also have the OATS program that is aimed more for the elderly community, and they also have digital navigators that support them, because it's different, right? Like if you're talking with somebody that doesn't mainly maybe speak English, or maybe somebody that you're supporting because they're elders and they don't know how to sign up into an email account, and then they get a scam and they lose money. So you have to be very, very careful when you approach people,
Right.
and when you are trying to support them.
We have a question from Jason Inofuentes about ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program. Certainly taught us some important lessons on funding availability from the federal government. And while I completely understand that kind of skepticism or cynicism or anger, I do still have a little bit of hope that it will get renewed at some point soon. But Jason's question is, how should we approach sustainability as a priority in planning for new initiatives? I'd be interested in your thoughts in light of the changes and for now to the Affordable Connectivity Program.
Can I throw out a couple
Please.
things?
Yeah.
So one thing is, we did an exercise a while ago looking at qualifying criteria for ACP, and you can actually map it out. And what you'll find is in most states, you've got largely wealthy communities that have about a 1% qualification rate, and then some tiny little areas that are just overwhelmed with large numbers of people, sometimes a majority who qualify. So, one of the things that's really interesting is flooding those areas with high qualification rates with advertising, doing it in multiple languages. And so that's something that we've brainstormed with various people about doing. So that's certainly so in the first wave of ACP, assuming it might be renewed, and we'll see, that there, a lot of it was just giving away money, but it could be done in a much more targeted fashion. The other thing is the income threshold in the ACP that just folded was relatively high. So if something gets renewed, perhaps with a lower threshold and other criteria, that might make it more targeted. But I think advertising to reach really the intended vulnerable communities is important.
Any other quick reactions on ACP by our other panelists?
It was devastating to have ACP sunset. It really was. We had numerous families that relied on ACP. Having that sunset has just basically gotten us right back to square one. Also, to sign people up for ACP was not easy. And it's also a very cumbersome process. So imagine going through that process with folks and then having them receive the benefit and have it yanked away within a matter of a year, or whenever they got to sign up. It was honestly a devastating thing to have that go away. So I know Universal Service Fund has caught a little bit of heat lately in terms of that potentially going away. And I truly hope that isn't the case.
I do think I will add that it was devastating in Philly. 183,000 people using it is not a small number. It's a very, very large number. And it is true that many folks were using it for their mobile phones. But I think that is a cliff that we aren't dealing with, which is that USAC doesn't pay enough for supporting folks to actually have a mobile phone even. So there's a whole bunch of issues related to ACP with that. But I do want to add one other thing around this notion of being served and what we can do about planning and sustaining affordability. I mean, we know that actually ACP was wildly successful in a very short amount of time for getting folks signed up. So we actually have some tools that we know works. We know that there's interest in it. And what I would say to folks is there could be tweaks along the way, but we're going to have to start thinking about it. And I'll probably get a call from some of our ISPs after this to say, we really do have to start thinking about broadband as a utility and treating it that everybody gets, that folks who are low income are going to need some level of subsidy if we really truly want to end this digital. I mean, that is what is going to have to happen if we think about it that way. And also, cities and urban areas need multiple ISP options that provide good service that folks can make some good choices with, so that they have options. They can't into debt in one and then be out of options. Like that is,
Right.
which is what's happened. And so we have to look at multiple strategy, increasing market in our urban areas for internet connectivity and subsidizing.
If I may
So-
add something,
Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but something that I'm very proud of is that the Colorado Broadband Office is committed to making access to the internet, affordable for all of Colorado families. As we know, that affordability is a critical piece of universal broadband. So all of our grantees from different funding, be it CPF, something that we are requesting is for them to offer a low-cost plan in their project area. And we are holding them accountable. That's something that they knew ahead of time before they signed into receiving these grants. And that's a way that we are trying to make internet affordable here in Colorado. Now, what we're asking is for their plan not to exceed $50 a month and to offer like 100 over 20 as requested by the FCC, if I'm not wrong. So we are thinking right now, we're like trying to figure out how is that we can do, or what is that we can do to make internet affordable now that ACP it's gone. And, we had here in Colorado 251,000 families or households signing to ACP. So now what's going to happen with these families starting this month, since ACP ended up, I think last Friday or 2 Fridays ago.
Yeah. Well, we've flown by our additional time here. I'm going to ask one more question and then give everyone a chance to answer that and or make final statements. The Kimmy Wei has a number of great questions, but going to combine it around this question of, for example, the broadband infrastructure availability in Newark's downtown area. Are all the homes and businesses inside that area considered well covered? I mean, we've done many shows on Broadband Breakfast Live Online where we compare the quote unquote self-reported or ISP reported data to crowdsourced data. And there's just lots and lots of areas, including area in cities, that are simply not really served with this level of coverage. And so Kimmy's question is, how can access speeds and even ability to access the service be reliably assessed? And that may be our closing question, and or anything else you'd like to shoehorn in. Let's just go in the same order we started in. Randy, Denise, Delia, Juliet, and Louisa.
So I think, in terms of assessing it, actually using crowdsourced data and seeing, who's running tests and what the tests are, that at least tells you the market impact that the provider is having. So that's one important piece. And I guess, just one, quick closing comment on everyone is I know, Drew, you're going to publish, some of the presentations. We have a contact list there. So if you have other questions or want to talk about data sets, pick up the phone and give us a call, and we'd love to continue the dialogue.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us, Randy. Denise.
I'm going to take a little bit different tact. With the Connecting Minority Communities grant that we have, we're taking the approach that a rising tide floats all boats. And if we create a big buzz in the community, we can get them to be a part of things. Then we can use the tools that we've identified, Ookla and other, we'd like to see all 3 different groups of tools, but we'd like to see the community involvement, and we'd like to see the community be excited about it, to get the connections and use the tools and opportunities once they have internet access. And I think they'll make it more of a priority if we can make it a bit more affordable.
Great. Thank you, Denise. Thanks for being with us. Delia.
Yes. I'm going to put in the chat right now. It's mainly for citizens of Colorado, where they can test their speed. I think it's a great tool. This is where we encourage all of our citizens to go, because in that way we know exactly where they don't have reliable internet, right, or reliable access to broadband. So that will be my input. Just go to that website, test your area and let us know what's going on, what's working, what isn't, so we can then challenge ISPs. We love to do that.
Great. Juliet.
I would say that it's really important for local communities to be able to get the data that they need, whether it's the crowdsourced data, their local surveys, to tell their story. They might be seen as served by their ISPs, and that will not going to be able to change that data set, but you can tell an effective story about the need. And I would say we all need to be doing that now to prepare for the competitive digital equity funding and your local state digital equity capacity grants, because that's where, if you are seen as served in your community, you're going to be able to leverage some of that funding for programs like digital navigation, for programs like maybe erecting wireless networks. So I would really encourage local communities to be able to start telling that story with some simple data. It doesn't need to be super in-depth, but stories of what people are really experiencing are going to be critical for getting some of that funding that's coming down the pike, even if you're served.
Awesome. Great last words. Louisa, you get the final word, so go ahead.
Sure. So, the FCC 477 data was never meant to necessarily be that granular. Prior to the fabric, it was basically just by block. If there was one household within the block that was served, it was considered all served, right? When the exercise that went through with CostQuest was just making sure that they understood that wherever those broadband serviceable locations are, not necessarily where providers are saying that they serve. So it really is up to states, political subdivisions of states, communities to kind of get to that granularity. But my plea to broadband leaders within states is to not discount what we know on the ground to be the ground truth. It's one thing to think like, hey, it's going to be the super clean process of we're going to put out this data set. It's going to be sort of true in terms of at least what these location types are,
right,
where these locations are, and then where ISPs are saying that they serve. But also allow us to make sure that we can go in and refute the challenge process that the FCC put out. Really, again, put it all on the residents to kind of navigate through that and provide all these speed tests and make sure they do it during certain times where perhaps the node won't be so encumbered or when everybody is home. So a lot to ask of residents who at the end of the day just really want to be able to get connectivity. So allow us then municipalities, community-based organizations, nonprofits to bring forth that information, that data, so that we can get to the ground truth on, what we know it to be true.
Well, thank you. That will have to be our last word. I guess the final thing I will say is that we will be putting again in the links for this that were discussed here at the bottom of the last URL I sent. What I'm about to send or just have sent is for next week, we're going to have a special program because it is a federal holiday, Juneteenth, and Broadband Breakfast is collaborating with the collaborating with the National Digital Equity Bible Study. This will be at 10 a.m. Central Time, or I should say 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So from 11 till 1, which is the normal time that we have Broadband Breakfast Live online, this special program will be available. It's a different Zoom link to sign up for. Make sure to go to Broadband Breakfast and find the page for it. We'll be back here at this regular Zoom link the week after when we talk about smart cities and spectrum policy. On behalf of our great panelists, Randy, Denise, Delia, Juliet, and Louisa, I'm Drew Clark, and we'll see you next week. Take care.